Welcome to your LAFC update brought to you by Pitchside US. I'm here with Eric Holstrom, my partner in crime, as I like to call you. Eric, how are you, my friend? Good to see you once again.
Same, Celso. It feels good to be back in the saddle again, talking about our beloved LAFC. And we got that magic of the Coachella preseason match yesterday that we got to see. And, I don't know about everybody else, but I'm kind of fiending for the season to start. The 2 months off already has kind of just got me into that withdrawal. Like, I need my black and gold.
Absolutely, and everything is going to start rolling now. We have game coming up with Club America. We'll talk a little bit about what to expect of that game, but more than anything, what to expect of this season for LAFC. As usual, we're very excited about talking about the black and gold. We're here in sunny Los Angeles. It was raining for a while, right, Eric? But, one thing doesn't change is our passion and commitment for the Los Angeles Football Club. And you're right. Yesterday, we finally got to see a little bit more of this team, televised game all the way up in the Coachella Valley there. Neither of us made it to the tournament, but, we both had a chance to watch it over TV, a change from last year when they just really didn't televise all of it. So let's just open with that. What did you think of what you saw in this game? I know you had some clips up already of some good things that you've seen, but before we break down the roster, which I know it's going to be a big part of what we're going to talk about it today, talk to me a little bit about what you saw, your first reactions of what you saw yesterday.
My first reactions of the game is that, it really looked like we were playing Dolo ball again. I think a lot of us, and maybe, I'm probably the biggest one responsible for this, but we looked at Giroud getting on the roster last season and kind of the tactics kind of falling apart. Like, he didn't really fit into what we were trying to do. And we thought we were going to have an off season of much more of a possession-based game. But looking at that, all of our chances at the game yesterday, they kind of came from classic Dolo ball counter-pressing moments. And, I do think that Giroud fit very well into some combinations with that, but it looked like our goals are going to be coming from Bouanga and Martinez this season. I know Giroud scored some in the closed door preseason, but unfortunately, we weren't able to really look and analyze at that. So what we did get was the game yesterday. And a lot of it just looked kind of like your classic Dolo ball, which has worked quite well for us for 3 years. And so, we're going to see how these pieces get put together.
Yeah, for sure. The 4-3-3 has always been at the center of this club, even before Dolo, right? Like, that was what Bob Bradley ran. There was always this 4-3-3. Last season, we started seeing some variations of that, but it looks like some of the frustration, some of the early frustration that I detect is kind of going back to basics, to this basic 4-3-3 with the counter pressing being so important. To me, I didn't see a lot of him, and people are already calling me out for being a homer of a Brazilian player, but I think the addition of a guy like Igor Jesus in the middle really says a lot about what this team is going to be this year. We'll talk about Igor as well in terms of the roster itself, but to me, very early to join up, to just put anything together, any sort of conclusions from one game in the desert that is open to the press, right? Which wasn't before, to the extent that it was. Now you have televised games, which means the other teams had footage. So automatically, in my opinion, you're going to show basically 50% of what you're going to bring in this season. And that's essentially what I saw. Good effort by some players, some, of course, known faces like Denis Bouanga scoring a penalty kick. We've seen this before, right? But ultimately, it's going to be about who is this midfield's going to be, which is kind of my next question for you. What did you see from the new midfielders? We had Marky Delgado there, of course, Igor Jesus. But what do you think of this new LAFC midfield that you said it before? Do you think it's going to be enough to allow Davi Martinez and Denis Bouanga to be the players that they need to be to suppress the lack of offense that we're going to have by the departures of maybe Christian Oliveira and Mateus Bogus?
What I was really thrilled with what I saw, and I've known what Marky Delgado has had as a player for a while, playing for our rivals down in Carson. We see how he's a really good midfielder. He's a very similar kind of to Kellen Acosta, but I think he's almost like a little more solid defensively and keeping the structure than Acosta was. But I mean, both the players have a very similar ability level, I think. Igor Jesus, this is a guy at least this is the type of player I've been asking for so long in this midfield. I mean, he plays the
Me and
Brazilian
you,
number
buddy.
six
Two of us.
style, which
Yes.
is hard crushing tackles. He
Yes.
makes sure that he dominates in that position, and that if players know if they're coming into his area, that they're going to have to look over their shoulder. I mean, he had a couple pretty good crushing tackles last game. One went for an advantage, so he has that controlled aggression that he knows how far to push it. But so far, he doesn't push it too far that he ends up, getting kicked out of the game and jeopardizing the team in that way.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing, and I posted the clip of that, long to Delgado to Giroud. There's a moment there that you kind of look on the side and you can see where Long is fighting for the ball, and Igor is kind of looking at like deciding whether he needs to jump in and pick up the loose ball or whether Long has it. And he correctly looked at it and let Long finish the play, pick it up, and distribute the pass. And I think a less disciplined midfielder with a little less soccer IQ might have rushed in for that loose ball for a second instead of recognizing that the center back still had it in control. And that would have created like too many guys in too small of a space. And, you don't know what happens with that chaos. So his IQ looks really good. His aggression looks really good. I think this is a number 6 that we haven't had since, prime Mark Anthony Kay or, Benny Failhaber, which to me is.
Oh, my God. That's a good company.
No,
that's not very good company, man.
Dude, Kay in 19, I know after 19, he got a lot of slander. But
Yeah.
Kay in 19 was the most critical player to our midfield.
He really was, yes.
We really missed him, and we did not play good, And
You're absolutely
Igor
right.
Jesus, man, like I think this guy has a shot for newcomer of the year. I'm just going to say it now.
Good. I'm glad we're on the same boat because I've just been criticized by someone on Twitter by being a Brazilian homer that only thinks he's going to do well because, he's from Brazil. First of all, I have to correct you, Eric. His name is not Jesus. He's from Brazil, so his name is Jesus. And you have to know that because if you don't know, Eric and I are going to be talking about Brazilian soccer a lot this year as well. And you need to know how to correct, I need to be able to correct you with these things. We need to laugh about it.
She said the same thing as Jesus.
As Jesus. And if you really want to be good about it, you have to say Jesus, like almost like he's French. But listen, it's beyond that. I think Igor. Exatamente. But look, the big thing about it, and this is going to be what people are slipping on it. LAFC just paid over $4 million for this guy. He's valued at $2 million according to Transfers Market. He was just transferred to a Portuguese team less than 12 months ago. He comes from one of the best academies in the world that it does rival La Masia as a place to develop players. He comes from Flamengo. He doesn't come from any team in Brazil. He comes from one of the best places to develop young talent in the world, and he's proven to be very mature. Right? It's not by accident that you just get rid of players like Elias Sanchez and such when you have your eyes set on a player like this. LAFC expects a ton from this player, and he's going to be key player in Steve Cherundolo's system of gegenpressing, of counter-pressing, of putting enough pressure on your opponent that you force a mistake and now you have a very small field to go with. We are not a possession team. We're not going to be a possession team in 2025. And I think Igor Jesus is exactly like you said, what we've asked for. A pit bull. I've asked for a pit bull in this midfield for over 2 years. I even thought Judson, a guy that was a forgotten dude at San Jose Earthquakes, would be someone that we could use to close in games. We had Yegson Mendes come in and try to be that guy, failed miserably. So I think LAFC has a ton of confidence on him, and he's going to become a pivotal player to allow the other midfields to do what they need to do to allow they need to not just be on an island, and Giroud particularly as well. Those attackers have to be in situations where, there's numbers against the other team so that they can find spaces more easily. And it all starts with that big pressure in the middle. And look, this is the last thing I'll say about Igor. His long ball game, and Eric, you're going to like this, is Mamadou Fall-esque. The guy has a long ball like you haven't seen it before. We will see a long ball from this guy very soon that will put a teammate in clear scoring position, and then you understand what I'm talking about. That's why I'm keen on Igor Jesus, a player that we played $4 million. When was the last time LAFC dished off $4 million for a player that was not supposed to score goals? This is a major signing for this team, and it's not because he's from Brazil. It's because we're really keen on a player that can free up the game forward for Denis Boanga and Olivier Giroud.
I'm
Go
glad
ahead.
that you threw in at the very end of that the qualifier who wasn't there to score goals because there's another
It's
$4
not.
million player that we're going to talk about later in the show who is no show so far this season. And
Absolutely.
I'm glad I didn't have to say his name yet. But one last thing about Igor Jesus is that I do think that of all the incoming midfielders since Trundle has been at LAFC, I just have a feeling the way he plays and Trundle's defensive mindset that Igor is probably like one of the more favorite guys that JT has picked up for the midfield, just as far as like the type of player he is. And I think he's a type of player we haven't had under
Yeah.
Trundle yet.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of questions for Steve Cherundolo from me about Igor and his role with the team, and such. So stay tuned and stay with us, and you'll continue to hear about this player's journey with LAFC. But let's transition a little bit before we go into the attack and talk about the saga of another unhappy Uruguayan with the black and gold. Let's talk a bit about the defense and what you saw. Aaron Long comes back as a free agent and signs with LAFC. Cements himself as this. I like to call them sheriffs. Right in the middle of the field. You have Marlon playing, and Eddie Segura gets the start yesterday, which I think means nothing. Doesn't mean anything other than this is the team that Cherundolo felt most comfortable with. This is the guy that's been training the longest there. But what did you think of the defense and what you've seen? And hey, we're still waiting for another left back, right? But what have you seen so far from the defensive side of LAFC?
The defense was pretty solid. I think obviously they kept a clean sheet, so that speaks for itself. If the opponent doesn't score on you over 90 minutes, you can't ask for anything more out of the defense. There is nothing more the defense can give you. Segura, pretty solid game. I know he was really kind of shaky towards the end of last season. He's been
Yes.
shaky since he's came back from injury.
Yeah.
I do, I have very high expectations for Marlon as long as he can stay healthy, because I think that's going to be the real trick with him is that, he's failed some physicals and that's why we got him and he's here for 6 months. So I'd love to see Marlon resurrect his career here and show that he still has another 5 or 6 years of really, really good Fuchi ball in the tank.
Yeah.
Palencia did what Palencia does. Same with Hollingshead. Hollingshead barely missed a header in the offensive side of the field. Palencia held it down on the right side. I do think long term against the top opponents, I'm not sure if these guys are going to be enough to go day in and day out. And this is probably going to be close to a 50-game season for LAFC this year, and I think that it's going to wear them down. They're a couple of years older than they were last time we had a 50-plus game season. And we saw last season where we didn't hit 50 games that, they were starting to get some wear and tear coming into the stretch down the final. So I do think the fullbacks are a position of need for LAFC, and I hope that it's something that still can get addressed, at least one more, and we'll see how it goes. But all in all, the defense was great. Long had that captain's armband, and I think he's probably going to have that captain's armband all year, and I think he's going to deserve it. And just that play we were talking about before, it was Long versus 3 defenders to get it to Delgado to spring Martinez, and that alone was just, that's top tier center back.
Yeah, no, he's a great one, and I'm happy to have him. And as I always thought, he should have been part of the U.S. men's national team rotation. I don't understand why he doesn't get any more looks. I know he doesn't have a lot of friends there, but I'll continue to be his advocate to make a comeback. Wherever that be, maybe it's past his time. I know he have a lot of depth in that position. Before LFC, he's been one of the top center backs in this league and deserves all the attention. And I'm so glad to have him down there. And, Marlon, yeah, he's a question mark. I think one that we don't really know where we're going to get out of. And, the fact that he didn't start yesterday was a little bit weird. But to me, he's still kind of getting back into it. and becoming the best version of himself. I think LAFC is a great place to rehab. And yeah, the defense is solid. I'm glad to see Hugo Lloris really kind of becoming the best version of himself, the one that we really wanted to be. This really solid goalkeeper. And by the way, if you're a Chicago Fire fan, best of luck to you with Greg Berhalter and what we've seen from that team. It did not look good. It looked discombobulated. Maybe they're still getting over Neymar not coming in here. By the way, the biggest bullshit ever that guy was ever going to think about coming in here when he's got everything at Santos. A story I have on Pitchside US but anytime you want to check that out. But no, really, in MLS, it's really sad to see what's going on in Chicago. It does not look like a good
I
team.
will say,
But last thing I'll say though, I'm sorry,
in
I will not overreact because of preseason game. I think they have every condition to turn it
also
around. But
Chicago
right now, it
wasn't
does not look good.
Chicago wasn't playing their best 11 either. They had some of their main players, and they were rotating some marginal
Of course
guys
they are. Yeah,
allegedly. But so a little grain of salt there. But nonetheless,
of course.
I mean, we subbed in a lot of our academy kids towards the end, and they still were handling it just fine.
Yeah, exactly. Look, it's in our academy is not that great. And I was gonna say, you talk about volume of games for LAFC, 50 plus games. Doesn't matter. First of all, stop crying about games. Players in Brazil, they play twice a week. Nobody's complaining. But I get it. They have more depth with their roster, and that's the solution. You develop your young players so that they can fill these holes wherever they are when the calendar gets crazy. But look, we're trying to make strides towards a leaner calendar, right? We're starting to tier up the U.S. Open Cup with the Leagues Cup so that they don't have to play both. So I like where we're going in terms of the volume of games, but I don't think anyone in the United States should ever complain about number of games because ultimately athletes all over the world are playing considerable amounts of minutes, right? So it comes down to depth, right? Do you have the depth to play more than one tournament at the same time? And that's where the big clubs differentiate themselves to me from the smaller clubs. Do you have enough power on your bench so that when your striker is too tired, from a Wednesday game, you can show up on a Saturday game and still get 3 points in a league game? I know there's a problem for basically every roster in Major League Soccer because of the constrictions that they have when they're building it. So, it's maybe a topic, a discussion from a different show, right? How can you build a diverse enough roster, right? So that you can stay in the conversation for multiple trophies and such. No team has been able to do that in Major League Soccer, right? And LAFC doesn't seem to have been able to do that either. But let's talk about the offense, right? Because to me, those are the players that are really going to decide the fate of this team coming up in 2025. We have the Conca Champions beginning really soon, which means that LAFC does not have the privilege of waiting to be in form. Our season begins right across, 2-3 weeks from now, and with the games in Colorado. So what have you
11,
seen from the front three, right?
yep, 11 days.
And
11 days
yeah,
is our first
it's
match.
exactly like in just 10 days. Excuse my poor math here, but what have you seen from that front three? We talk a bit about Giroud. Let's start with him. Do you think Giroud in 2025 is going to be a better version of himself? What do you think of the Giroud saga so far? And I personally think too early to judge, but now the clock's really ticking. We're going to be watching it. What do you think of him in 2025 based on what you've seen so far?
Man, this is a brutal one because, as you know, Celso, we're running into the Pookie Gomez rule of don't judge the team until they're 10 games in.
Of
But
course.
our very first game in is a two-leg elimination against Colorado. So
Exactly. Can't
we're,
mess around.
straight into the fire on this.
Hmm.
This is really tough. Number one, we have to look at the preseason games we couldn't watch that Giroud scored in, which is something we didn't really see at all last season. He's the most expensive guy on the team and the marquee player. So the trouble always is like, how do you sit your like star blockbuster billboard player? This is
Well, you
sports
shouldn't have
plus
to.
entertainment.
Let's be honest. Yeah.
Yeah. So it from the front office point of view, like this is very unrealistic. I mean,
Hmm.
it would take some brass ones to like sit Giroud for an important game. So I think what we saw him do, in a way, he almost has been playing a bit more like a false nine instead of a target
Hmm.
nine, and they're just using him for link up play, which
Got it.
for a guy like Giroud seems like you're completely utilizing him the wrong way. But with the rest of the lineup, I think that's like the best that can be done. And I think that watching that game, the goals looked like they were going to come from Belonga or Martinez, and that's kind of
Yeah.
it. Or it's going to come on a set piece. And, we see Hollingshead get in there for those. So I think they'll keep like this. Giroud's going to be more of a like a creator and a link up play guy. And maybe we'll see some target actions going on as they move forward. But I think our goals are going to be Martinez and Belonga. And I don't
Okay.
think this is going to be the most effective use of our front three, but it's what we got. And
Yeah.
interestingly enough, we saw Ibobasi get subbed in the game, and within
Hmm.
2 minutes, he drew a penalty because he got behind the defense, and we got a penalty right there.
Hmm.
So that
Hmm.
was a whole other thing that, Ibobasi comes in and we score. It was very, Ibobasi is a upgrade from Kai Kamara. And
Agree.
we saw that last season as well. When Kai Kamara would come in, all of a sudden we looked way more threatening, and
Hmm.
crosses started coming into Kai that weren't coming into Giroud. So this still is a work in progress that hasn't been figured out, and they're going to need to figure it out quick. Maybe they'll have a grace period against Colorado, but it's with a front three that's not clicking like this. If Colorado brings their A game, we may find ourselves in a real tough
Well,
matchup.
they're gonna bring their game, and it's altitude. It's everything. And it's an away game on a two-legged series. So you have to be very careful with that because you don't want to find yourself in the wrong side of this. And Colorado has something to prove too. They've made really big investments into their club. They brought in some talent, and they have they've really turned things around there. With the core players that they have. So LAFC should be really careful. We're not just playing some team in the middle of Costa Rica that nobody really knows about, and we know we're going to get through. This is a competent Major League Soccer side, which different from the Major League Soccer playoffs, right? Which we had just a free shot at them at home. You know what I mean? Like you don't get you get the game away as well, which I think really changes the dynamic. LAFC is going to have to be very balanced defensively in this game and not allow itself to be scored at because you don't
I
want to come
yeah,
home
I
with
I think
a
I think we play
deficit.
this for a 0-0 is going to be the smartest. But we'll have another show, I think, to talk Colorado more in depth.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. I'm just thinking ahead already. I mean, like, how is this team's going to show up? And we're so close, right, to these games, these very key games, and we're still talking about who's in form and who's not. So everybody should be looking in stride and ready to go if you're 10 days away from a very important match. To me, I think Giroud, I personally did not see him a lot when he was abroad and was not a player I paid attention to. It was not my type of coffee, and he was French. And Brazilians and French, we always had this rivalry. I just never saw him play and be the standout player that everybody said he was. I always thought he was a complementary piece to someone else, whether you look at the French national team or at Milan. He was always complementary to someone else. Now, here he's complementary to Denis Bouanga, right? That makes sense. He's the second, offensive and scoring threat behind Denis. I like him not being so much of a target reference, being moved to more of this false nine, but that's not his cup of tea. That's not necessarily what he's made his money. So LAFC is going to have to figure out to get him into the game. What I've noticed, and again, we always like to bring some stats into this, is even the number of shots he was taking is too low. Like my coaches, when I was like in Pee Wee soccer, would tell me, "Hey, if you want to score, you got to take a shot, even if it's a shitty shot, right? You got to take at least a chance at it. But if you're not getting open or in a position to even take a shot, then that's the problem that we got to fix it." Because I'm like, well, I never take shots. It was like, well, that's because you're not getting open. So then you got to understand why that's happening. And I think some of it last year was 100% systematic. He gets brought in the middle of a transfer season that he's never been accustomed to, and he's just like, go ahead and click on this roster that doesn't even know how to cross. So there was just some fundamental roster issues, which I think been addressed this year because they really want to make the Giroud thing works. But like I said before, Eric, it always starts and ends with 99. If 99 scores, we're going to be okay. And I really
Yeah.
think it's all about opening space for Denis Bouanga to be who he is. Do you expect a big season from Denis this year? What do you expect of 99? And do you really think he's going to continue at the pace of production that we've seen from him the last 2 years?
I mean, his pace of production last season, there's he can only go up from there. I think MLS does keep like the hockey assist stat, which is, the assist to the assist. And I think this is a stat that, looking at how it's been so far, that he should be doing very well in. It seems to me how I think he's going to be best used is as the target man for, Lloris, or maybe even Igor, that he's the guy they can make the long ball and bypass the midfield to. And from that point, he's going to lay it off to Denny or Martinez, etc. And he's going to spring the attack that way. Which, of course, he's not going to be able to keep up with the attack. So it's going to be up to them to work some magic. But for me, this is right now how I see Giroud being utilized as best as they can.
What about Boanga though? I made 99. Meaning, do you think Boanga is going to keep the production that he had in the last 2 years? Because again, to me, it's all about how good Boanga is for this roster. What is your expectations for Denis Boanga in 2025?
Bouanga needs to be our top goal scorer again if we're going to have success, and that's that. He's as they said, he's had 2 20-goal seasons in a row. If he does another 20-goal season, he'll be the first MLS player in history to have 3 consecutive 20-goal seasons. And if we are going to be successful as a team this year and achieve goals, or at least come close to achieving the goals they want, we are going to need to see a 20-plus season from Denis Bouanga. This is where our goals need to come from. I think our defense is going to be pretty tight, and I think we may not need to score more than 1 goal in a lot of games, or 2 goals. But Denis is going to have to make this happen.
Yeah, I my biggest concern with Matty Bogusz leaving was that there was so much offensive production that came from this kid, and I'm now asking myself who's going to be the second or third guy, right? That's going to supplement our goal scoring. And I can think of so many key goals that Mattils have done and have scored for LAFC. The Lightning goal against Seattle in a 1-0 game, the goal against Monterrey at the Rose Bowl Stadium to give us a lead that we thought we were going to have, a 2-0 lead to progress in the League's Cup that year. So he was a player that was always there to score when Denis wasn't scoring. So I agree with you. Denis is going to have to be a major force again for this roster, which will likely make him unhappy of being in Major League Soccer, which will force a transfer. So it's all kind of like a cycle, right? It's like the Cucho saga, right? Like it's going to be Denis now. He's the guy, right? So, but if he keeps that up, yes, absolutely. LAFC is going to continue to lead the Western Conference and, likely face, what I think it's going to be, hope to be the Western Conference Finals this year. The derby against the Galaxy. I still think the Galaxy is going to be extremely strong this year.
Yeah.
And but LAFC, don't sleep on LAFC. I just looked up the odds to win the MLS Cup, and they're up there. So
I think
recycling or not, we're pretty good.
I think our roster, like last season, I felt like the Galaxy's roster was a little stronger than ours was, especially at the end of the season with everybody clicking. But right now, looking at our roster, I feel like our roster might be slightly better than them, especially with the players they've lost that they haven't replaced yet. So I'm pretty optimistic that on paper this year we are the better team, at least right now.
The core is there for them, man. But
yeah, I also think we have room for improvement on our roster, which we will see. The other thing that I kind of wanted to mention too, you said, where's the replacement from Bogusz going to come? It's going to have to be Tillman. Tillman's going to have to take a big chunk of that. And I see you rolling your eyes a bit. Tillman is
it's not eye roll. I just don't think he's got it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, same thing. I'm not sure Tillman has the creativity and the vision that Bogusz has. He has some good attributes, but he doesn't shoot as well and he doesn't pass as well as Bogusz. So this will be a struggle. But I do think that where the extra slack is going to have to get picked up is in the wing backs, especially when we go to the 3-back. And Adrian Wibowo, who came out, this kid looks like he may be the best academy product we have had. Wow. I also think that we also have Yaya Boa on the other side, and we're going to see how he comes in. But he may come in and give a lot of contributions to goals as well. So if it's not Tillman doing, completely making up for what Bogusz used to do.
Mhm.
Our
Mhm.
wingbacks may be the ones that are going to need to step up, and those are going to be our wild cards for this season.
Totally. Yeah, one thing is for sure, and I believe in this. Like if you're gonna win anything in Major League Soccer, you need to bring some of these MLS veterans that have been around the league for a while, that know how to carry themselves in games, and that have won in other places. And that's exactly what we saw LAFC does. Before the title run, when they brought in guys like Ilya Sanchez, Shradi, guys that were like, roster dudes in other places and then came to LA and became contributors. And Yeboah, to me, is someone said it on Twitter that he was going to be sort of the steal hire of signing of this window, and he could be because he was a key guy for Columbus for a long time. Lost some room there, ends up becoming a free agent, and we pick him up in this rediscovery draft, which to me is still kind of a mind-boggling thing. I'm trying to understand, but he could very well be the Shradi, the George Shradi of this year. A guy that will score like 3 or 4 goals for us and win us games that we don't expect to. We need guys like that. We need guys that have walk the walk, talk the talk, and are not coming in fresh. I think in the past LAFC try to bring in these foreigners that they, no offense to them, they're excellent players, but you still have to adapt now to the system and to the league itself. And it takes time, and there's a risk it doesn't work out. There's very little risk with these MLS dudes, and not to mention that you're dealing with a different currency. You're at times dealing in GAM, or you're picking them up from supplementary drafts, other ways, other non-traditional ways of signing players. And you and I know how important it is to be a master of these ins and outs to become an MLS champion, to become an MLS roster that wins games. Especially as we talked about multiple competitions.
Yeah, 100%. So expectations, man. Like with this LAFC team, where do you think their ceiling is? What heights do you think they can achieve, or do you think they might? How close to those heights do you think they're going to get? I mean, we have
Yeah, good
CCC.
question.
Let's start with CCC. Like, how optimistic are you with us making a deep run into this tournament?
I think the run can be deep. It's a great question, and I think the big issue there is the competition that you end up going to face. And I haven't looked at the bracket yet to really dissect who's got an easier path, right? But if you think about the teams that are going to be strong, you have probably a couple Liga MX teams that are going to show up, and
We
as they always do. And then even on the MLS side, you have a lot of eyes on some of these other rosters. So LFC, if they're going to win, it's probably one of the toughest paths they're ever going to have to have. They're probably going to have to face the Galaxy. They're probably going to
are
have to face a couple Liga MX teams,
Yeah,
and
our
and,
our
and
most
even an
likely
Inter
path.
Miami.
Our most likely path. We start with Colorado. If we get past Colorado, we pay Columbus, who's as a bye the first round. And then if we beat Columbus, the next team is most likely going to be Inter Miami, who has a pretty much a cakewalk up to the quarters. And
Correct.
then at that point, that'll be that.
So
So
three MLS rosters, right, and like all of them, like
three good ones,
competent
three
rosters.
good ones.
So if you get past that, now you have to go against toe to toe against Liga MX team, and
And
how's
then the
how's it going to
final,
look
and the final.
physically? How are you going to look physically? Because now your MLS season's going and fatigue's becoming an issue, right? And you just in battle like 6 games just to get to what, the semifinals, to a top 4, to a top 8. I don't have the bracket in front of me, but I personally think LAFC, not from their own lack of competence, ends up dying in the top 8. Okay, and I just feel like the roster is not ready. They didn't have momentum last year. They're still putting things together, and it's the Conca champs. We either fall to Miami, which has all the momentum, or to the first Liga MX team we face. So again,
Yeah.
not very high on LAFC for the CCC. Higher on them for the other tournaments, but not for the CCC. What about you?
I think looking at the Colorado game, just because of our success against them, although there's wild cards, which is that we don't know what the weather's going to be like out there, and this,
Yes,
for example,
tough.
this rain today, this is going to be snow in Denver in 2 days. So if we have a
That's great.
rainstorm come through a couple days before, we could find ourselves with like a snow game.
Winter,
Yeah,
great.
and this.
Oh,
So I'm honestly the Colorado matchup. I think we're favorites in there, but maybe 60, 65% favorites. Maybe like, so it's they have a good chance of an upset here. After that,
Yes.
if we take them, then it's Columbus. The one thing I think I like about Columbus is Columbus has also, much like Carson, they've had some losses on their roster this year that they're
A
probably
hundred
not going to
percent.
be
Well,
able
they
to.
just lost their best player. That's tough to
Yeah,
do.
and they're not going to get them replaced. So I think we're not going to see as strong of a Columbus team that we've had in the last couple of years.
Yep.
But Wilfred Nancy is probably still the best manager in the league, and it's you can never underestimate when we go against them. So I think Columbus is going to be a coin flip 50-50 if we get through. And then we have Miami, and it's hard to look at ourselves as favorites against Miami because we still have an incomplete roster. We've been hearing about
Mm-hmm.
Griezmann coming here for a year and a
Mm-hmm.
half at this point, and the guy is still
Yeah.
in Europe. He's still
Yep.
going to be there at least till this summer, maybe even until next year. So
Pie in the
it's
sky,
kind of
man.
it's going back into things with only two DPS, and
Yeah.
is can you really compete at these top levels with a roster of two DPS and four U22s because you're
But yeah,
just
yeah, I was
getting
gonna say you can with the four U's, and I really believe you can, and that's why they choose this path. I like
yeah.
the path of four U's.
You
I
can.
personally do.
The trouble always is with a lot of these tournaments, especially getting up into the finals, experience plays so much of a role in these games, and
Yeah,
having the
agree.
young guys without that experience, that's where it's really up to the coaching staff to make sure they're ready for the moment and they're really understand it because the veteran
Yeah,
guys who are only in one or two cup finals their life, when they're in there, they know this may be the only one they ever get, and they put it all on the field. So with the young guys, they got to have this realism injected into them.
I agree. And look, the young guys are going to become more and more important for LAFC. We saw some academy leadership leaving, and we know that the crass of LAFC wasn't ready. I wasn't happy with what they're seeing out of the development. I'm so happy to hear that we have a prospect that could be transcendental to the main team. And make no mistake, we've had young guys come here and become great, like the Mamadou Falls of the world. But that's not a true academy player that was developed within your systems and was found in the outskirts of LA. This is what LAFC does not have yet, a presence in that sort of game and in that sort of youth. Eric, what do you think of the regular season in Major League Soccer in general? I have a much easier and better outcome or outlook, I would say, for LAFC during the regular season. I think this is a roster that is built for the long run. So I expect us to be top 2 or 3 in the West and going to the playoffs with a pretty strong seeding position to maybe face the Galaxy in the Western Conference Finals and not poop it out to the Sounders this year. What do you think is going to happen with LAFC in the long run of the Major League Soccer regular season?
Yeah, I think we have at the very least right now we're going to be top three in the West. I think
It's not easy, by the way. Let's just give them some
no,
credit, right?
no, it's not. I think if we're
Yeah.
looking at the supporter shield table, I think oh,
Yeah.
this is where it gets tough. It's like you can look at like the money Atlanta's spending right now,
Yeah,
and
that's
that I
exactly
mean,
what I have. You
woo.
got it.
But I'm optimistic that we're going to be a top five on the supporter shield.
Agree.
Um, and in the West, I won't be surprised if we're first place or second place. I mean, I want to say that we will be the top team in the West again this season, but the East, man, the top end of the East is just frightening.
They're really
So
crazy. Yeah, and I think the champion this year probably comes out of the East because they're just so loaded. You have Atlanta just playing the way they're gonna play well. Now, it all depends on how many knees Mercedes Benz Field is gonna claim by middle of the season because I swear to God, like you go in there just to blow your knee up and then like not ever be the same player again. And I really believe it impacts them there, regardless of what data says. It's the one place where I think it's terrible for your knees. And I had Brazilian players tells us that Mateus Rosetto said that is not a good surface to play. So that's always the question mark with Atlanta. But I'm excited to see what comes out of the East. I think Atlanta United is going to have a really good season. And, for all the Dolo haters out there, right? When you finish top 5 in the supporters shield and you make it to the playoffs and you have CCC, That's not enough to make you move away from that coach. You cannot move away from a coach when he's accomplished that, even if he loses a final. I've said this before, and I truly believe it. I know it hurts to lose finals, but if you're always competing for the top stuff, make sure you recognize that that is a good job, and more than likely, more than what's been agreed upon, between coach and general manager. And I know that they both have a great relationship. Eric, I got one more question for you, and it's always going to end with him, right? What
All
is
right.
going on? What do you think is going to happen with Carlos Vela in 2025? First of all, I cannot believe we're having a Carlos Vela coming back conversation in February of 2025, but we are. Here comes again the drama and the suspense and the guy not training, and we are hoping that he comes back. For what? I don't get. But what do you think is going to end up happening with Carlos Vela? Will he ever play for LAFC again? And will he ever be a valid contributor for LAFC once again?
Will he ever play for LAFC again? Probably not. Will he be a valuable contributor? No. He's.
So you're a no guy. You're like, nah, it's done.
I
Bye.
mean, I think he might come out for the last 15 minutes of a game that's like not competitive just to get a round of applause again. But
Why would
I
you do
think
that? Why would you sign a guy like that, right? When you really
yeah,
need depth in
yeah.
your roster and you're going to play three
Because here
three
another guy
tournaments
we
this
didn't
summer.
talk about was who's backing up Martinez, and it's looking like it's going to be Nathan Ordaz. And if you do look at Nathan Ordaz's contributions last season, his goals and assists was actually per his 90 was a really good
Not
number.
bad.
So,
Yeah,
so
no,
I mean,
Nathan,
this
great.
is
I got it.
so for Ordaz, he's been in the system a long time. Backing up Martinez, we'll see what he can do. I think we could do a lot worse for a backup. So I'm pretty confident just on those rotation games having Ordaz at that right wing spot. Like to me, this is okay with the MLS roster rules being what they are. I don't mind it, and that should be Kike Oliveira's spot. We didn't really get into him, but
No,
he
we're
is.
gonna get into him. This is our closing, but go ahead. Lead us
Yeah,
lead
yeah.
us
We'll
into the
we'll
water,
talk more,
buddy.
but he's still holding out from the team. He basically
Yes.
is acting like a child and not a professional athlete, and he's not honoring his contract. And so, our front office won't talk about it because it's
They shouldn't.
no, 100% they shouldn't behind closed doors. But the guy's agents leaking out there to everybody that he doesn't want to be there. He doesn't want to be in LA. He doesn't want to be in the United States. He wants to be on Nacional. He wants to be there for free. And it's Gremio made a pass at him, but they would only pay 3.5 million. LAFC wanted 4.5 million, reportedly. And this is for a guy that we turned down 8 million from Toluca last August. So he's already at 4.5 million is a steal. He's just not happy here. And, I hope he has a nice vacation for 2025 at this point, because that's what it looks like it's going to be. So,
So let's talk about why do you think he's unhappy, right? Because I see this story as almost like out of left field. He's a guy that probably lost some space within the roster, and it's likely what he doesn't like, that he's not an
yeah,
unconditional starter in this roster, and then suddenly the team makes certain moves to bring competition around him, so he doesn't feel valued enough, and he's now forcing a transfer while being under contract, which it's a classic holdout position, right? But not
yeah.
something we've seen in Major League Soccer, So it becomes like kind of a problem. I have a perfect solution for this, by the way. Nobody wants to hear it, but I would trade him for a vendor real fast. Get a vendor to LAFC, send him to Portland, and let them figure the shit out. You know what I mean? You don't like LA? Here's Portland for you, buddy. And then we would get another unhappy Brazilian to kind of team up with Igor Jesus, and everybody's happy. That's my solution. I know it's not going to happen, but look, I want to talk to you, and this is going to be our closing here, to talk about Christian Oliveira and what's driving his unhappiness. These cats, they come here with an expectation that they're going to dominate, and they don't get the system, they don't get the culture, and they fail. And then they want to go back home where they're going to be known as heroes, and they can resurrect their career. Exhibit A, Neymar. Exhibit B, Christian Oliveira. It's the same situation, man. I know it's a very different type of player, but it's the very same thing. These guys are egocentric. They're very young guys. Christian is extremely young, and he's a family guy, so he's probably getting some pressure from the family. I need to go back home. I'm not. I don't have. you're not worth what they, you're worth a lot more than they think you are, is in his head. And agents play a role in that. I work for an agency. You know what I mean? That's their job, is to pump up their client, Eric. So tell
Oh
me, what's going
no,
to happen? What do you think is going to happen? Because ultimately, you said it's a situation where contracts has been signed and they have to be honored, right? Otherwise, you don't get paid and you don't get released. So it's a stronghold. Who do you think wins? How do you get past that?
he is signed under contract with us until the end of 2026 with a team option for 2027, which means we can lock him up until 2028 if we feel like it. Like his signature is there, it's a valid contract.
Correct.
A lot of it, I think. I think there's two things. The first thing I think is that um, he was told, "Hey, we're going to move you to wing back. We need you to play as a fullback." And I think Oliveira does not want to be a fullback. He wants to be a wing. He wants to be an attacking player. Like, to me, with the player, this was probably the biggest reason. Because if I'm not mistaken, early in his career at Penarol, he started as a fullback and then
Sure.
moved up to wing. And I know I've been saying it for a while. Looking at it, he looks to me more like a fullback than he looks like a wing, because his crossing is okay. His finishing is, he looks like
Poor.
his shoes are on the wrong feet when he
It's
shoots.
B-Rod esque. It's terrible.
Well, but B Rod's gotten better at it, and it's funny that you bring up B
Yes.
Rod, because B Rod has the same agent as Kike Oliveira has, and part of it I think is this guy, because I think these agents, every time a player moves and makes a transfer fee, they're going to get a percent. They're going to get their
Of
piece out
course.
of that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for an agent, the more you can convince your player to get transferred, the more you're going to keep raking these percentages on every transfer they do. Regardless that if he would have, worked, instead of indulging Oliveira on wanting to leave, if he would have played a more mature role and say, "Hey, you're under this contract, just keep grinding, doing your thing, and you're going to raise your value, and you're going to get that trade." And maybe he spends a year here at fullback, and his trade value goes up to 9 or 10 million, which is totally possible because he looks like he would be an outstanding fullback. But instead, he's like, "Oh yeah, you want to go? All right, here, just stay in Uruguay. Tell them this excuse about the fires, that you don't want to go back because of the fires, and then the next thing you know, his
Bullshit.
family's all leaking this crap about Nacional, and it's just disrespectful."
Yeah, I think the reaction towards him, however, been a little bit extreme from LAFC fans, and every by the way, every single
I'm
person
like the
has the
harshest of
right.
anybody
I
out
know
there.
you got everyone's just making him into a gigantic asshole, and we all have to respect the fact that this is business, and he's probably been promised things from the club that he's not getting. There's always two sides of the story, and as fans, we always want to side with our team, but it's not good for LAFC that he's having this very anti-club stance either. But what I've noticed with the South Americans is, suddenly they become unhappy with management or the direction of what the club is going, and they just want to get the fuck out. This is not just a Kiki Oliveira issue, as I said. You've had guys like Lucho Acosta publicly calling out FC Cincinnati's, upper class because they traded away players. You have Chicho Arango bounced out of Utah because of something he said or did to an employee there. No questions asked, just, pennies on the dollar for the guy. You have players like going to Argentina, which has been never been a true buyer of Major League Soccer players, but you have players like Driussi now finding their ways in South America because they're unhappy with what's going on in the United States. I'm talking about soccer, of course. So, dude, there's so much going on and so much pressure from South American players to leave Major League Soccer. It concerns me. It concerns me that this voice is becoming a little bit too loud, right? In saying, hey, we're not treated the way that we're supposed to. We're not valued the way that we're supposed to. And we rather take a contract to go home and become the center of the attention at a team like Nacional, which is not even the top Uruguayan team in the, in the country, than playing for LAFC in a place like Los Angeles. Something is fundamentally wrong about that. And I think the league should be paying attention to why these guys are just wanting to leave after being here for a year and a half. Evander should not be wanting to leave Portland. They give him everything, but he's unhappy that they traded his players. They don't like when their friends get traded. It happened in Utah as well when Chicho had his buddy Gomez gone, and then RSL was never the same, and neither was Chicho. So long-winded there, but I wanted to address this unhappiness of these South American players towards Major League Soccer and decided to go back home. It's not something that I've seen before. It's always been the opposite. Just to let you know, we're 55 minutes of recording right now. We're getting towards the end of our program here. But I wanted to give you a chance to say that. I knew this would happen, but it's great. It was a conversation that needed to be had about LAFC preseason. We talked about so much. We talked about Igor Jesus. We talked about the midfield. We talked about the offense. We talked about Carlos Vela, for Christ's sakes. We talked about literally everything. But Eric, I want to first of all give you time to respond to what I just said. South America's being unhappy in Major League Soccer. Culture, to me, is still an issue. You're married to a Brazilian woman. You know how different the cultures are, especially the soccer culture. You're married to a Brazilian woman into a Brazilian game, the Jogo Bonito. Tell me a little bit about what you think this means in the greater scheme of Major League Soccer. Does it hurt the league, right? It seems like right now we've become buyers of more of the European market than trying to develop a young player coming from Brazil that was, a Brenner or someone like that always had the pedigree, the dollar amount, but it's coming out here, being a year here and then being unhappy and wanting to go out.
I really think I don't think it's anything systemic. I think it's just a struggle that athletes always have. If you look at it, it's another shout out to Pookie Gomez. But when in his pro baseball career, he said he had a coach early on that says, "Hey, you love your God, you love your family, you like your team," because they know at any time they can go get shipped to another team. And players having their friends get transferred out doesn't just exclusively happen in MLS. It happens at every top club in Europe. It happens at the bottom clubs in Europe. It happens in Brazil. And I think part of it is like, hey, this is your profession. Part of your profession means that one day you can get traded to another team. And for the guys that come here and don't like it, there's guys, let's look at Diego Rossi, consummate professional. He came here and he ended up going to Turkey of all places, sucked it up, came through. Then we look at Atuesta was more than happy to come back to MLS from Brazil. His South American soccer experience has not been that great. There was I think it was Savarino missed a game because he came back up here to renew a green card, even though he's not playing up here anymore. Laurent Simon is another one that came here from Europe, and his whole personal things coming to LAFC was a huge broken promise by Montreal. But we as fans never knew about that until he left, because he was a consummate professional. And that's the difference between the great players. The great players are professional. They understand what they're doing. They understand they might not like everywhere they go, but it is their craft to be the best player they can be and to make the team around them the best that they can be. And you see the great players will go places they don't like, and then guess what? They end up usually going somewhere they do like. It's all a rotation, and it's the profession they've lived in. So with the case of TK, and I think with Brian as well, I think it really more just shows his personal immaturity than it does anything else, in my opinion. And I've been harsh on him, but I also see statements like this and airing out his dirty laundry is really just unprofessional and unacceptable. And so I'm not afraid to call that out.
It's also a growing trend. They're all doing it, and I think it's pretty easy to go to social media and try to explore, put out there your side of the coin, right? Because before you never had the opportunity to do so. So he's basically saying that he wants something else, and LAFC has to listen, deal the player, move on. It's a distraction at this point. I actually think he's not that great. We got him thinking that we were get Irvin Lozano, and so he was already coming in as a consolation prize, yay, we got Kike Oliveira. You know what I mean? So to me, good riddance, good contributions, but never really broke through here. And if he's not having the season or the career that he's having in Major League Soccer, it's his own damn fault. He's got to play the game. It's got to do what coach has asked you to do and become a contributor in the larger roster. I think if Kike would have been a little bit more of an imposing player, LAFC would have broke the hump and gotten a couple more trophies like a Leagues Cup, right? He just wasn't there when we needed him the most. So it is what it is. Move on. If we have to take a loss on the guy pay-wise, I think that's really the only thing holding LAFC back right now, because they're going to have to eat some money, right? And they don't want to do that. They paid top dollar for this guy.
They just had an $8 million offer for him in August. I mean, what's that?
Well, that's August, buddy. You know what I mean? That's not
6 months ago.
February.
Still,
oh my God, that in soccer is like a fucking decade, though.
If he would have just kept his mouth shut about like not wanting to be here, and the front office could have negotiated for him with none, like people now want him at a discount because they know he's not going to play here. If he would have kept his mouth shut and let the team negotiate, he would be somewhere else already. And part of why he's not going is because he just had to gossip and no discipline on that.
Oh my God! Just like I would pick up Portland, the phone. I would pick up the phone and call Portland right now and say, "Look, I have this disgruntled player. You have this disgruntled player. Maybe we can work something out. Like, I know they're different players. They'd have different values, different roles. But like, here's two really unhappy motherfuckers, right? And you can't put them on a trade. We just saw the NBA pull two of the most ridiculous trades we've ever seen. Luka Doncic, now Jimmy Butler is going to the Golden State Warriors. Like, these things have to happen in this league to keep us interested, right? To keep us guessing what's going to happen next. I love Major League Soccer because it has a little bit of that American flavor, and trades are such a big part of it. And I really hoped and wish that we would do more of these blockbuster, deals, right, that would send players around, whether you like it or not. You know what I mean? Like, in soccer, this does not happen. And I know it's wishful thinking, but ultimately, it feels to me that these two should definitely swap spots, right? And we could use Evander so much in that midfield, and Portland could use a guy like him that could really be featured out there, and there's a big salary dump for Evander too. But look, it's not going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen with Evander as well. I just don't like this trend of all these guys unhappy. But look, Eric, we've been talking for a long time here. I want to thank you very, very much for, spending time with me, talking LAFC. We're going to be doing this very often now, right?
Yes, we are.
Weekly as we did. We're not live yet, but maybe we'll start that again later in the year, as we usually did. But it's been a pleasure. A lot coming up. What do we have going on? We just launched a new website, Pitchside US. That's where you'll find stories featuring soccer, featuring different teams, not only from MLS, but also from the Brasileiro side. Some of the teams are going to be playing here in the FIFA Club World Cup in 2025. So we got a lot going on this year. Eric's been a contributor there talking about Palmeiras. We're also going to have another show where we're going to be talking specifically about the Brasileiro and the teams and everything that's going on south of the hemisphere. But, if you like this, give us a chance. Follow us on Instagram. We also have our Axe account, and of course subscribe to a brand new newsletter that we are launching with the best articles in soccer, like I said, not only in the northern hemisphere but also in the south. So with that, Eric, thank you very, very much once again for being here, and we'll see you until next week, my man.